Hello, my name is Reverend Dr. May Elise Cannon. Today is Thursday. It's the last day of July 31st, 2025. Today is day 664, 664 days since October 7th, a day that changed history, but was not by any means the beginning of decades of occupation and conflict between Palestinians and Israelis. This is the weekly update, so this is a longer update. I wanted to let you know the last 2 days we've convened meetings and helped facilitate a gathering of Christians, Christian leaders, including Palestine Israel networks of different denominations, denominational leaders, some pastors, nonprofit leaders at the Carter Center in Atlanta. The meeting was under Chatham House rules, which means I can tell you some of the things that happened there. I'll do that in the days ahead, but for now, I've been calling people to pray. And it was really, really remarkable to come together as 120 or 130 or so Christian leaders from around the country. We had visitors with us from Palestine, visitors with us from South Africa, who came as observers and participants. And it was an incredible gift. And yet we came together in the common grief and reality that we have failed, that we failed to end the atrocities that have happened in Gaza for 664 days, but that we will not give up. And so the call to the church from the Palestinian Christian community, and particularly those who were there was actually a call that the churches need to put pressure on the U.S. government to engage in sanctions against Israel. We'll talk in a bit. There was a historic vote last night that Bernie Sanders put on the table calling for the withholding of offensive weapons from Israel. And so the engagement of economic actions, boycott, divestment, and sanctions is one of the most significant nonviolent tools that can be used to not only bring an end to the ongoing conflict in Gaza, but also to the occupation and current crisis and differentials of power. Updates from Gaza over the past week. Yesterday, Wednesday, Israeli troops killed at least 30 Palestinians waiting for humanitarian aid. It was said that about 300 additional people were wounded. The IDF said that they fired warning shots, but that they were not aware of any casualties. The Gaza Humanitarian Foundation said that there were no killings around their sites that took place yesterday. Day after day after day, almost every day, we're hearing these kinds of reports of deaths at distribution sites for humanitarian aid. Israeli killed at least 78 Palestinians across Gaza on July 28th. This included at least 25 people searching for food. It also included a pregnant woman whose baby was delivered after her death, but then the child also died. God have mercy. On Saturday, Israeli fire killed an additional 42 Palestinians in Gaza overnight. I think that was overnight into Saturday. Starvation deaths have continued and increased. Gunfire killed at least a dozen people waiting for aid trucks at the Zakim crossing with Israel in the north on that day. Last week's strike on Gaza's only Catholic church, the Latin Holy Family Catholic Church, killed 3 people. It injured 9 others. Israel said that it was due to an unintentional deviation of munitions. They said that last Wednesday. Falling short of mentioning the fatalities, the IDF acknowledged that the strike caused damage to the church structure and injured several Gazan civilians. The deadly strike drew international condemnation, and Pope Leo XIV called for an end to the barbarity of war. If you haven't seen CMEP's statement about that, I'd encourage you to take a look on our website. Late last week on Friday, it was reported, according to Israel, that 800 aid trucks were waiting to be collected by agencies in Gaza, adding that 70 trucks were unloaded at aid crossings yesterday and 150 were collected by the UN and aid organizations on the Gaza side. An additional 10 people have died from malnutrition, said OSHA. This was related to the preceding Wednesday on July 23rd. OSHA warned that hunger crisis in Gaza has never been so dire. All too often, civilians approaching UN trucks are shot at. Last Sunday, Netanyahu and the Israeli military announced that Israel would suspend its armed activity in different parts of the Gaza Strip. Now, the way the international news picked this up is they said humanitarian pause. It sounded like great news. Lots of people were very excited about this. I heard it and rolled my eyes. 10 a.m. to 8 p.m., they said it would be until further notice to allow in a minimal humanitarian supply. This was after major international pressure, the EU and different countries around the world threatening sanctions. But the military said that there needed to be safe routes for aid convoys and that they would be opened. Now, what we've heard in terms of what actually happened was nothing in terms of what was called for and what was described by the Israeli military. And I've been calling it a farce. The humanitarian pauses on that particular day, more than 50 people in the Gaza Strip, 50 Palestinians were killed when there were purportedly humanitarian pauses, throughout or at different parts of the Gaza Strip. Tom Fletcher, Secretary General for Human Affairs, Under Secretary General at the UN, confirmed that over 100 truckloads were delivered into Gaza. The Israeli Air Force also resumed airdrops. I'll talk about how stupid those are in a minute. And Jordan and the UAE parachuted 25 tons of aid into Gaza. Monday, it was reported that Israeli soldiers killed 12 Palestinians, injured more than 100 others as they were seeking to collect food in Gaza. Now, the thing to know about airdrops is there's already plenty of food and humanitarian assistance available and or at the borders. It's not a technical border between states, but, the crossings, the Rafah crossing, there are miles of trucks waiting to deliver food. I reported this past week of 1,000 trucks that the food was destroyed or buried by the Israeli military. So there's nonsense that there's not food that's available at these crossings, but instead of letting the food in and providing security so that it can be delivered safely, food is being dropped from the sky, which is ridiculously expensive, highly ineffective, and woefully inadequate. Now, Israel did resume drops. They started that on Saturday. And that was just a few days after the report came out from the more than 100 international aid agencies, including Churches for Middle East Peace as an advocacy organization, that warned that mass starvation was spreading across the enclave. Palestinian sources confirmed the aid had begun to be dropped in North Gaza. Now, the malnutrition levels have reached alarming levels. That happened this month in July, with rates on a dangerous territory amid an entirely preventable crisis. This was the WHO saying that. Netanyahu also yesterday reasserted his claim that there is no policy of starvation in Gaza. He said there's no policy and there's no starvation in Gaza. But according to the health ministry there, 14 people died of malnourishment during those 24 hours. Médecins Sans Frontières, Doctors Without Borders, that charity said it was witnessing catastrophic levels of malnutrition, with 25% of children and pregnant women screened at the MSF clinics suffering from malnutrition. A quarter of the population of children and pregnant women screened at that clinic. They said 20% of children in the entire strip are malnourished, and the numbers increase every day. There is real starvation in Gaza. President Trump said that this past week, adding that civilians have to get food and safety right now. He said that the U.S. would work with European allies to distribute more aid, including by setting up food centers without barriers. Trump's statements broke with that of Netanyahu insisting that there was no starvation. Now, last week, there was an exclusive from Reuters that found that the U.S. aid itself analyzed the situation in Gaza and found that there was, listen to this, no evidence of massive theft of aid by Hamas. This was an internal analysis by the U.S. government. It found no evidence of systematic theft by the Palestinian militant group Hamas of U.S.-funded humanitarian supplies. This challenges the whole rationale that the U.S. and Israel gave for backing this newly formed GHF. It's an armed private aid operation. It's literally allowing corporations to make money off of the starvation out of Gaza. That is sick. The analysis, which has not been previously reported, was conducted by a bureau within the U.S. Agency for International Development. It was completed in late June. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff has now landed in Israel. According to U.S. officials, he's expected to discuss the humanitarian crisis. He's also going to be going to Gaza. I read that he's visiting, and he'll also possibly visit GHF aid sites. And Israeli soldiers did die from their wounds sustained in South Gaza this past week. And then there also was another attempt by a flotilla to take aid to Gaza, as a symbolic act, calling attention to the crisis, to break the blockade this past week. Israeli forces boarded and seized Handala, the flotilla bound for Gaza. If I remember correctly, Handala is you should look it up. He's a graphic, it's a graphic person that's facing the opposite direction. And it has said that he will not reveal his face until the occupation of the Palestinians is brought to an end. His artist, my understanding, at least the folklore, is that he was murdered and killed. I don't know that story very well. But that Handala flotilla was blocked. International advocates said, that the people on it were kidnapped. They were arrested by the IDF in what accordingly is violation of international law. You can see the final seconds of a broadcast online where an Israeli soldier could be seen grabbing the live camera. I got a message this past week from a Palestinian colleague we partner with closely in the US, and I wanted to tell you his story. It's one among thousands. He said, my cousin Nasser was killed trying to save his 5 grandchildren, following the murder of his own children. Now the grandchildren are also gone. We tried to help Lama and the other kids, but Israel decided to complete its crime. And then he sent me a link to the story that's told in TRT World. It's a Turkish news outlet. And he told the story of the 11-year-old granddaughter. Her name was Lama. She aspired to be a journalist. And then an Israeli strike in Gaza killed her. Lama Nasser al-Badrasi was documenting the Gaza genocide with courage and clarity and purpose, the purpose of a seasoned journalist. She was killed by Israel along with her family. Lama was intelligent, confident, and determined. She filmed videos within the Gaza shelters. She practiced her English. She spoke directly into the camera with a calm demeanor well beyond her years. She wanted to be the voice of her generation, especially of the children growing up beneath drones and warplanes. One day, she too became a victim of the genocide she was documenting. On July 15th, an Israeli airstrike flattened the 6-story building where Lama Nasser al-Badrasi and her family had taken shelter after being displaced multiple times. Lama was killed along with her mother, father, and 4 siblings, Salma, Nada, Sham, and Aziz. Her grandfather Nasser died during the flower massacres. They were the series of attacks where Israeli forces targeted civilians lining up for food in either 2023 or 2024. According to eyewitnesses, shrapnel severed Nasser's arm and he bled to death while he was still clutching a plastic bag that was filled with bread and water for Lama and her siblings. The family, repeatedly displaced, sought refuge in various so-called safe zones and none that offered protection from the relentless Israeli bombing. I wanted to give you that personal update. In terms of ceasefire negotiations, on June 25th, Trump said that Israel must get rid of Hamas after negotiations had failed. Despite progress being made and mediations by Qatar and Egypt, Israel recalled their negotiators. Witkoff, special envoy for the U.S., and Prime Minister Netanyahu stated that alternative options will be used to bring the hostages home. Now, options could include increased military engagement and other nefarious possibilities. In the occupied West Bank, the only Christian Palestinian village, entirely Christian, it's called Taibeh. It was attacked by the Hilltop Youth, which is an extremist settler group of Israeli settlers. It's led by extremist figures such as Naria Ben Pazi. This attack enabled members of the group to throw stones at homes. They wrote threatening messages on the walls. They set 3 cars on fire. While the group had previously been focused on targeting livestock, their violence now has escalated to people. We put out a second statement about this attack that just happened, which included fires burning very close to the church in the community. Related to Israel, an investigation of 972 magazine and Local Call revealed that Israel is engaging in something that's called double tap airstrikes, which essentially targets and kills individuals and then targets and kills rescue workers that are attempting to help those who were wounded in the initial airstrikes. This practice destroys efforts at aid. It ensures that first responders and rescue teams cannot make it to sites that have been hit. Double tap airstrikes are widely considered illegal under international law as they further civilian harm and target first responders. In addition to this practice, there have been instances where the military has blocked ambulances and health personnel from entering strike zones where children and others have been gravely injured. Now, this week, this is very, very significant. Two of the major human rights organizations in Israel, B'Tselem and Physicians for Human Rights, they released reports accusing Israel of committing genocide against the Palestinians in Gaza. They said that an examination of Israeli policy in the Gaza Strip and its horrific outcomes leads to the unequivocal conclusion that Israel is taking coordinated, deliberate action to destroy Palestinian society. There was a joint statement they published. These reports are the first time any Israeli group has used the term genocide to describe Israel's actions. An Israeli government spokesperson strongly rejected the report's findings and said they were entirely unfounded. There are also landmark protests happening in Israel where many Israelis are walking, carrying pictures of starving children in Gaza. And we wonder, might this be a turning point that is so desperately needed? I mentioned Taipei, which I should have included in updates about the occupied West Bank, but overnight into Saturday, Israeli settlers set fire into buildings in the Palestinian village of Deir Allah, which is in the southern West Bank. That was overnight into Saturday over the weekend. Soldiers detained 12 suspects at the scene and transferred them to police custody. Looking at the broader Middle East, let's start with Syria. Saudi Arabia announced that it would invest $6.4 billion in Syria. This is a sign of the deepening relationships between Riyadh and Damascus. There were a series of fires and explosions at military bases and weapons storage sites in Syria this month. This raised concerns about whether the caches of unexploded ordnances from the previous civil war were located closely to civilian areas and whether or not they had been properly secured. There was an explosion at a military base in northwest Syria last week that killed at least 6 people and 100 more were injured. Over the weekend, a Syrian delegation comprising officials of the Foreign Ministry and General Intelligence met with Israeli officials in Paris during a U.S.-mediated meeting where they discussed recent security developments and efforts to contain the escalation in the south of Syria. Syria also said they will hold their first parliamentary elections. Those were announced. This is the first since the fall of Bashar al-Assad. Those will happen December 15th and 18th. The country has been increasingly invited, has become increasingly open to this, but earlier this month, violence broke out in Soweto between Bedouin clans and Druze religious minority. Hundreds of people were killed in those attacks. I think we've talked about them quite extensively. In Yemen, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth signal messages, if you recall this crisis, they were about the U.S. military strikes in Yemen, and they came from a classified email. Now, previously, it was said that it was not classified, but an independent watchdog within the Pentagon or of the Pentagon received evidence indicating that these were classified emails. The email contained strike plans that had been shared with a dozen defense officials. It was labeled secret no foreign, meaning no foreign. Secret designation is considered sensitive. It's unauthorized to release this, and no foreign designation is not to be shared with foreign nationals, according to U.S. allies, or including U.S. allies. The revelation contradicted what the Trump administration said and their longstanding claim that there was no classified information shared in those chats. Related to Iran, Tehran's nuclear negotiator, Badi said Iran is open to resuming negotiations with the U.S., the sooner the better, but wants assurance that the talks will not be used as a pretext for further military action. The Treasury Department Wednesday announced a fresh tranche of sanctions related to 115 Iran-linked individuals, entities, and vessels. These are the most significant Iran-related sanctions since 2018. In declaration setting out a phased plan to end the Israel-Palestine conflict, there was a high-level conference at the UN the 29th and 30th of July. You'll recall it was convened by Saudi Arabia and the French. They urged Israel to commit to a Palestinian state and give unwavering support to a two-state solution. The conference included the idea that the Palestinian Authority would govern all of the Palestinian territory, followed by a transitional administrative committee and a UN stabilization mission. Israel and the U.S. boycotted the conference. Around the UN conference gathering, the UK said this week they'll recognize a state in September unless Israel takes substantive steps to end the appalling situation in Gaza. Critics have said that that is a stupid idea. So you're rewarding Israel for doing what Israel already should be doing, according to international law, let alone morality. The terms include that they would not recognize the state of Palestine if Israel agrees to a ceasefire, allows the restart of aid supplies from the UN, and commits to a long-term sustainable peace that delivers a two-state solution. Now, Netanyahu, I'm saying that's rewarding Israel. Netanyahu described the move as rewarding Hamas for their monstrous terrorism. Canadian Prime Minister Carney yesterday outlined a plan for Ottawa to recognize a Palestinian state also in September. That's related to the UN General Assembly that will happen then. President Trump said earlier today that it would be very hard for the U.S. to strike a trade deal with Canada in light of Carney's announcement, while Israel's foreign ministry consistently describes that type of move as a reward for Hamas. In an unprecedented step, the 22 Arab League states on Tuesday for the first time issued a joint call for Hamas to disarm and relinquish power in Gaza, backing a declaration signed by several states at a UN conference. Many pro-Palestinian activists have rejected that call because there was not an equivalent call for Israel to lay down their arms when they are the primary actors perpetrating such vast devastation and death in the Gaza Strip. In the US, President Trump signaled on Friday that after the breakdown in negotiations for the ceasefire and hostage deal, he believes Netanyahu should escalate the war in order to get rid of Hamas. Now, those comments were made almost a week ago. We've not heard much of that since, but it's important to make note. Trump also specifically said he believes Israel should fight and clean up to finish the job to get rid of Hamas. That was on the 27th. Those were some direct quotes. Separately, Rubio told a group of hostage families on Friday that the U.S. needs to do some serious rethinking of its Gaza strategy. Tuesday, 40 U.S. senators signed a letter urging the resumption of ceasefire talks. It was sharply criticized by Israeli-backed American organizations, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. The letter was addressed to Secretary of State Rubio and Steve Witkoff. And last night, Bernie Sanders forced the vote today. He forced the vote last night in the Senate on the joint resolutions of disapproval. You know, I think the last time a vote calling for the withholding of weapons came forward, there were only 18 senators who signed it. The joint resolutions of disapproval was introduced by Bernie Sanders. It would block U.S. offensive weapon shipments to Israel. By stopping those arms sales, Congress could send a clear message that diplomacy, and only diplomacy, not weapons, is the way to achieve a peaceful settlement to the violence in Gaza, the West Bank, and across the region. CMEP supports the actions of withholding weapons from Israel because they're being used in violation not only of international law, but U.S. law. Now, that did not pass last night. It was rejected, the idea of halting sales of bombs and rifles to Israel, but opposition against sending those shipments of military aid have grown, particularly with the Democratic Party. Although the vote showed a number of Democrats opposed to arms sales amid the widespread hunger and suffering in Gaza. The resolutions would have stopped the sale of $675 million in bombs, as well as shipments of 20,000 automatic assault rifles to Israel. Now, they failed to pass, but 27 Democrats, which is more than half the caucus. It's a much higher number than we thought. I mean, there was not much hope for those numbers to increase, but 27 Democrats voted for the resolution that applied to assault rifles. 24 voted for the resolution that applied to bomb sales. It was more than any of Sanders' previous efforts, which were at a high mark in November last year, where they only gained 18 votes. The senior Senate Democratic leader, Chuck Schumer, said in a statement, he's also the highest ranking Jewish lawmaker, said in a statement following the vote that the Trump administration and Netanyahu have a responsibility to urgently surge food and other aid into Gaza. Still, he voted against the resolution. I'm proud to say that one of my two senators, Senator Patty Murray, she's a Washington Democrat. She voted against similar resolutions by Sanders in the past, but she voted in support of the legislation. If you are from one of the states where senators voted yes for the passing of the sorry, all of a sudden I completely lost my train of thought and where I was. Voting for the Sanders bill to withhold offensive weapons. If you're from one of those states, be sure to call them and say thank you. In different news, there's no break between the prime minister and Israel and the president, with their relationship is stronger than it's ever been. That's what Ambassador Huckabee said last week about Trump and Netanyahu. Huckabee also called European leaders' decisions to recognize a Palestinian state very foolish, arguing that they amount to support of Hamas leaders. Friends, there was another attack on the community of Taipei over the weekend. I did talk about that. But as I close, I normally like to close with an update about Christians in the Middle East. Taipei is to the east of Ramallah. I talked about torched cars, the sprayed hostile graffiti in Hebrew. The incident was 20 days after the first attack by settlers. This was near the ancient church of St. George. And a statement from the Forum of Holy Land Christians made 3 demands that I want to be sure that you're aware of. So this is the Forum of Holy Land Christians. First, an in-depth investigation by a neutral international body. Second, holding terrorists accountable, as apologies alone won't ensure that it will not be repeated. And third, to act against not only terrorists, but also those who incite them. So I wanted to let you know that the closing of this statement by the Forum of Holy Land Christians is that we urge all who have some influence to act firmly before it's too late, since such an incident contributes negatively not only for the increased fears among Palestinian Christians, but also for reducing the belief in the chances for reconciliation and peace ever between Israelis and Palestinians. for which we continue to pray and work despite all of the challenges. So that is the update for the week. Weekly updates are often quite long. The news is quite desperate. And one of the things we talked about at the Carter Center is that we have failed thus far, but we will not give up. We will continue in our efforts. So may God go before us to that end. In the name of Christ. Amen.